from the quarterback position, right? And let's just go over the top five. Lamar Jackson, Nick Fitzgerald, Luke Falk, Nick Shimanek, and Eric Dungy, right? I mean, you can make a case for Rudolph, Mayfield, Flowers, Woodside. You can make a case for any of those guys being in the top five, right? You know, the one guy out there in the top five that I will say, I'll throw this tidbit out there, and I think if you looked at the way that we analyzed the schedules, the one thing that really jumps at me is Eric Dungy, right? I think Syracuse's schedule is really made for a fast start. I think it was last year, and I think it is this year. Eric Dungy, as we mentioned, you always have to worry about injuries, right? But the Syracuse schedule really shapes up for a lot of success in the beginning of 2017. I think you can get off to a real fast start with Eric Dungy. I think you'll see him at the top or near the top of the rankings throughout the first 4 weeks of the season. And it isn't until they get some of their tougher opponents in conference play that you have to start worrying about Syracuse. And then, one guy I was a little worried about. I have to say this name because he is in the possible bust list in our fantasy guide. Kenny Hill, quarterback, TCU. I think he's worked his way out of that bust area. I think Kenny Hill's going to be okay. I don't know if there's a lot to worry about Kenny Hill right now other than the fact of an injury. I think as long as Kenny Hill stays healthy, as long as Kyle Hicks stays healthy, as long as Levante Turpin can stay on the field, and maybe they mix in another guy at the receiver position, I think TCU's going to be okay. I think Kenny Hill's going to be okay, right? And you got your usual suspects, J.T. Barrett, Riley Ferguson, Trace McSorley, and then we got Jamar Smith at 14 this week, right? Jamar Smith was high in our preseason guide. And, a lot of people's like, what do you have to look at for Jamar Smith? Why is he so high? Guys, here's the one good thing about college fantasy football. Here's the one good thing that we like to do, what I like to do personally. I don't like playing it safe, right? And I'm going to go to the drafts. I'll address the draft issue right now while we're talking about quarterbacks and Jamar Smith. I'm a boomer bust guy. After you get through the first three picks, I think three rounds, okay, go with the guys that you think are going to be secure, guys that are going to give you a lot of bang for your buck. But you know what? You got to be able to go out on the limb. You got to be able to take the boomer bust guys. I don't want the average guy from round 4 on. I want the guy that's either going to hit it big, or if not, he's off my roster in 3 or 4 weeks. And that's the way I approach every draft. And you know what? I get a lot of questions about drafts. And I know we're past drafts right now, but keep this logged in for the future, right? Guys send me emails all the time. I have the 6th pick of the draft. I have the 8th pick of the draft. I have the 12th pick of the draft. What do you suggest is my strategy going into this? Guys, this is what I'll tell you. Draft 101 college fantasy football. You can't dictate a draft. Let the draft come to you. You have to draft as things fall to you. I can't sit there with you at the 10 spot and tell you, you know what? Take a quarterback, because I don't know what's going to go before you. I don't know what's going to go after the first round. You really have to have a feel for the draft. There's no science to a draft, but it is an art. It is an art. And in art, you feel it. And in a fantasy draft, you have to feel it. What separates the guys that have good drafts from the guys that have ho-hum drafts is they let the draft come to them. They find value on the board late, and they take those guys in the middle rounds that are going to hit home runs for them. And if not, they're off their roster in week 6 or 7. Anyway, I'm getting off the rails, because if I continue to do this, I'll go off the rails all night, guys. I haven't talked to you guys in forever. I got so much to say, and I hope I can keep it all bottled up for maybe 30 minutes or so, because I don't want to go on too long and just bore you to death. But here we go. We talked about Jamar Smith, right? Louisiana Tech. I think Jamar Smith's going to have an incredible year. Personally, he could be too low at 14, but we'll see. He's got Teddy Veal now. I think he's got Alfred Smith there in the slot. There's Jared Kraft returns at the running back position. Guys, sometimes you have to play the system. Sometimes you got to take guys in the system, and Jamar Smith to me is that guy. I have no concern playing him in week 1. I have no concern starting him as a quarterback 1 in week 1. So there's my take on Jamar Smith this week. And I'm going to go down the list with a couple of other guys I like. I like Armani Rogers at UNLV. If you've purchased the preseason fantasy guide, we've been high on this guy all summer long. I've been recommended people to take him. I really like the UNLV schedule. I'll tell you what, especially if you're in a 2-quarterback full FBS league, I think you're going to get something right there with Amani Edwards. And hint, hint, his name might be coming up a little bit later, a little bit later in this show. And also Arian Worthman for Air Force intrigues me a little bit. He doesn't seem like the typical Air Force quarterbacks that we've seen. I see him carrying the ball a little bit more often. I think he may be a little bit more of that mold that we've seen quarterbacks over at Navy. And I'm real interested to see what Arian Worthman does in week 1 against VMI. And maybe he doesn't do too much because VMI is not going to be that great of an opponent. I could see him handing the ball a lot off. But I'm really intrigued by Arian Worthman. But I think more importantly this week, a lot of guys really fall into play. I think when you look at these extended rankings, guys, the one thing that I will say, we went about 85 deep at quarterback, right? We went 130 plus deep at running back and wide receiver. Whatever we post on the website every week, it's pretty safe bet that we'll double that every week. So we'll probably list 60 quarterbacks every week. We'll probably list about 100 running backs. We'll probably list about 100 receivers every week. The only reason why these lists go so deep is because there are so many question marks in week 1 and 2. We just don't know. As the college football season plays out, we get a better idea of what goes on week to week, and we can condense these rankings. We're not taking some long shots, but there are some names at the end that I'll get to that are value plays. I think more so at the receiver position. I have a few for the running back position, but let me finish on a few things here at the quarterback spot, right? There are a couple of questions this week we got about Brent Stockstill and Jarrett Stidham over at Auburn, right? Stockstill at Middle Tennessee and Stidham with Auburn. Stockstill's rated, we got him ranked 30 this week. And I have to tell you, I think that's a pretty fair rating. Look, I know he's got Richie James, he's got Ty Lee, and he's probably got some other guys to throw the ball. But guys, it is Middle Tennessee. Now you can say, well, it is Vanderbilt that they're playing, right? But Vanderbilt was okay. I mean, if you remember, I think it was last year, the year before, where Vanderbilt was playing high-powered Western Kentucky. And Western Kentucky, they didn't do much. So I think Vanderbilt's a respectable defense. I don't think that somebody Middle Tennessee is going to score 40 points on. I don't think that they're overpowering enough that they're going to really keep down Brent Stockstill or keep down Richie James. But I do think they'll limit them. And they'll keep them from being ranked too high in week 1. And like I was saying, you have to go with security sometimes. You have to go with a sure thing. And so that's why we have Stockstill ranked at 30. And Jarrett Stidham. Got tons of emails on Jarrett Stidham. The one thing I'll say about Jarrett Stidham, and I really do believe this, I don't know if he's going to have as big of a year statistically as some people who are emailing me tell me is. Now, I hope for your sake I'm wrong. But for me, when I look at Auburn and I see the strength of the Auburn football team and the strength of their offense, guys, it's the running back positions. Cameron Petway, Kerryon Johnson. If there's a strength at Auburn, it's in the running backs. Now, I do believe Kerryon Johnson's going to be used a lot in the passing game, right? But what wide receivers are established at Auburn? Now, I know Stidham and I know that offensive coordinator can produce some receivers there, but there's nobody that's really done it consistently yet. And I just don't know if I see a Gus Malzahn team abandoning the run that much when they have studs at running back. I do like Stidham, but I don't know if I like him to throw for 4,000 yards and 40 touchdowns this year. I think that would be a surprise. So those are two names at the quarterback position that I just wanted to bring up that I got a lot of emails on. Everything else is pretty straightforward. Everything else is pretty reasonable. And I think the one guy that jumps out at me that's a little bit of a surprise, Peyton Bender at Kansas. And we're going to revisit him a little bit later too because he happens to be in the start bench. So I'll save my material and my excitement for that start bench piece. But